High school pop quiz. Mr. Jefferson taught high school economics. The class was studying recessions and learned that banks create recessions to increase their profits and that recessions and bank loans were directly related. Mr. Jefferson taught from the Federal Reserve Bank publications. After he taught the class about bank loans, he gave a pop quiz. Mr. Jefferson ordered his class to clear their desks and take out a piece of paper and a pen. He gave the class one essay problem. Using everyday language, explain the economic effect of a 100,000 bank loan. The first student wrote, there are two banking systems. Under the US Constitution, everyone has equal protection under the law. There is no economic effect of stealing or counterfeiting. The banks loan out other depositors' money to borrowers. We fought the Revolutionary War to stop the European banking system because it denies us equal protection. Under the European banking system, the banks do not loan other depositors' money. The banks create the money like a counterfeiter and loan out the newly created money. Counterfeiting and stealing have the same economic effect because the bank ends up with nearly all the property for free. If a counterfeiter could create all the money he wanted, he would create money and loan it out. Soon, the counterfeiter would own the promissory notes, bank loan agreements, promising to repay the loan, and the liens, a creditor's claim against your house or car to ensure repayment on a loan, on nearly every house, car, farm, and business in the nation. It is like printing money to buy all the property and renting it back to the citizens. The lender, counterfeiter, owns the liens and collects the interest for free, just like buying the property and collecting rent. It is like stealing the property and renting it back to the victim of the theft. Counterfeiting is more sinister than stealing. People can easily see an out theft and use their vote to stop it. Counterfeiting is not as easily seen. People think they are loaned other depositors' money, but the lender knows it is new money that was created as if by a counterfeiter. Modern day bankers know better than to counterfeit cash and go to jail, so they create checkbook money. They know your labor produces a payroll check. Your labor is worth money. American bankers merely shift the value of your future payroll checks to their pocket for free under the guise of a loan. Thus, they receive the liens on the nation's assets for free and charge the citizens interest on what was taken. Counterfeiting creates inflation and devalues money, destroying the property of other citizens. People are fooled in thinking that the banks give depositors interest so they can loan the money out. The truth is, the banks agree to only create new money in relation to money on deposit. Example, if the bank has 1,000 on deposit, it can create 900 in new money, which people call checkbook money. They loan out the 900 of checkbook money, knowing few people use cash. People use cash for small purchases and checks for larger purchases. Under the constitutional banking system, the people own their homes, cars, farms, and businesses with very little debt compared to the European banking system. In the European system, for every dollar counterfeited and loaned, at the moment the loan papers are signed, $1 of wealth is immediately transferred from the citizen's pocket to the banker's pocket for free. Just before the American Revolutionary War, the colonists used colonial scrip money under a constitutional banking system. In a sinister plot to obtain the colonists' property for free, King George of England forced the citizens into a European banking system. thereby allowing the banks to obtain nearly all the colonists' property for free and forcing them to pay interest on what was taken. According to founding father Benjamin Franklin, this was one of the primary reasons for the Revolutionary War. The Constitution prohibits the European banking system by requiring gold and silver money and equal protection. Imagine if Congress forced the citizens to surrender their assets to the bankers for free. Then the bankers return the value of the assets back to the citizens as loans from the bankers to the citizens. Imagine Congress or representatives allowing bankers to legally steal or counterfeit. Mr. Jefferson was amazed to see how well this student understood the two banking systems and gave him an A. The next student wrote, think of the United States as a big casino. One can use cash to buy dinner or cigarettes. If you wish to play the slot machines, however, you must use casino tokens. There are two kinds of money, cash and tokens. Tokens are the private money used within the casino. Players trade 100 cash for 100 tokens. The law requires the casino to have $1 of cash or cash equivalent, an asset that can be sold for cash on hand for every token the casino issues. If you have 25 tokens left at the end of the day, you may exchange them for 25 cash. Nearly everyone uses tokens because they are more convenient than cash. Merchants outside a casino accept them as money because their value is equal to cash. The casino bank offers loans of 100,000 tokens if the borrower signs a 100,000 promissory note agreeing to repay the tokens. The 100,000 promissory note can be sold for 100,000 cash. So the promissory note meets the legal requirements to be a cash equivalent. The casino uses the promissory note to issue and fund 100,000 newly created tokens. The casino received 100,000 value from the alleged borrower for free, used it to create new tokens, and returned the same 100,000 back to the alleged borrower as a loan. Receiving the promissory note for free is like receiving stolen property. Nothing of value was loaned to obtain it. The new tokens are like new money, like counterfeit money. It is like stealing and counterfeiting rolled into one transaction under the appearance of a legal transaction. The agreement only agreed to use the promissory note to repay a loan, not finance new tokens given back as a loan. The tokens are not legal if the promissory note did not fund the value of the tokens. If the note funded the value of the tokens, the bank loaned nothing of value to the borrower. It is like depositing 150 with the bank, returning the 150 back to the depositor as a bank loan. The bank loaned nothing to own the 150 deposit. The bank does not legally own the promissory note until the bank fulfills the agreement and first loans 100,000 of actual cash value to the borrower. The borrower expected tokens to be backed by other depositors first depositing cash, not the casino owner using the value of the promissory note to fund the newly issued tokens. If the bank received the promissory note for free, it is the same as a theft or as a thief getting your future payroll checks for free when they are used to make the loan payments. Stealing future payroll checks or stealing a car and selling it for cash and depositing the payroll checks or cash from the car sale and then returning the money back to the victim as a loan is really stealing, not a true loan. Bankers know that no one in their right mind would agree to this. So the written agreement conceals the fact that the bank does not loan other depositors money, and the bank gets the money from the borrower for free and returns it to the victim as a loan. If you replace the word token with the words checkbook money, you just described American banking. Mr. Jefferson was amazed at the student's insight and gave him an A. Another student wrote, "The bank acts like a money changer and charges you a fee as if there was a loan. You loan the bank a 100,000 promissory note that can be sold for 100,000 cash. The bank invests nothing and records receiving the 100,000 promissory note as a loan from you to the bank, thus funding the loan from the bank back to you. A 100,000 loan from you to the bank was exchanged for a 100,000 loan from the bank back to you. It is like exchanging a newly created IOU for another newly created IOU. The bank demands that we use the bank's IOU as new money, counterfeit, and the bank never pays their IOU. Then we must work to earn the bank IOU money to repay the principal and interest on the loan from the bank to us. The bank even got the people to call the bank IOU checkbook money. When people use checks, they use the IOU as if it was money. It is like exchanging 100,000 of American money for the same value of German money, and then having the bank charge a 100,000 fee plus interest for the transaction. It is like depositing 100,000 of future payroll checks at the bank and withdrawing excuse me, and withdrawing the money as a loan from the bank to you. The teacher gave him an A. The next student proposed that it was like the old goldsmiths of several hundred years ago. Everyone deposited their gold at the goldsmiths for safekeeping. The goldsmiths gave the depositors a gold receipt showing the amount of gold coins deposited. The merchants used the gold receipts like money, knowing they could exchange the receipts for gold coins. Soon, there were few people using the gold coins. Instead, they were using the receipts as money. The goldsmiths realized they could create gold receipts without actually having the gold to back it, because few people ever asked to exchange the receipts for gold. The goldsmiths advertised that they could loan money at 10% interest. People flocked to the goldsmiths. Farmers agreed to lien their farms and sign promissory notes. The goldsmiths created new gold receipts, promissory notes agreeing to pay gold coins, because people used these receipts as money instead of the gold coins. So instead of loaning 100,000 of gold, the goldsmiths received 100,000 in actual value of gold for free. He received the borrower's promissory note for free and could sell it for gold. Excuse me. The goldsmiths created new money like a counterfeiter when he created new gold receipts, tokens, and loaned them out. If you replace the word gold receipts with checkbook money, you just described today's American banking system. Mr. Jefferson gave him an A+. He congratulated the student, saying that using the example of gold receipts was an excellent way to explain the banking system. We will use this illustrative pub quiz as a building block and add to this concept as we go along. Secret bankers meeting. I believe we have the best government in the world. I personally believe that neither government officials nor the voters understand banking procedures and money transactions the way bankers do. I have talked to certified public accountants who were themselves confused, so I can certainly see how Congress and the president could be confused. This book is designed to clear up the confusion, giving you the methods to cancel bank loans without going to court. To best illustrate the problem, I present the following hypothetical story. This book will prove that the economic and political effect illustrated in this story has happened in America. An invitation went out to the top bankers in the world asking them to meet and discuss how they could work in unison to increase bank profits. A month later, a dozen of the top bankers met in secret. Before the meeting began, they stood around talking about the good old days. One of them said, if only we could create money and loan it out. That would increase profits. Another replied, if only we could become money changers, exchange 100 for 100 and charge 100 plus interest for the exchange. Yet another spoke up and said, how about making the borrower deposit 100 while we withdraw the 100 and give it back to him as a 100 loan? Doubting Thomas said, people will never be so stupid as to allow us to do that. Richard, who called the meeting, rebuked him, saying, you're wrong, Thomas. I have devised a plan to do exactly that, without the people ever suspecting what's being done. Everyone, please be seated, and I will explain how we can end up owning nearly all the wealth of the globe without ever loaning 1 cent of other depositors' money. He went to the front of the room and explained the following. Gentlemen, I have a bill in my hands that I wrote, and that the Congress and the President will pass, making it legal for us to convert the property of the world into our hands without people ever realizing it. Today, the people own their homes, cars, farms, and businesses debt-free because the government prints money like President Lincoln did. We will stop Lincoln's successors and ensure that only the banks can create money. We will then loan it out at interest. Every time someone receives a 100,000 bank loan, the bank will create 100,000 of money and loan it out. The people will have 100,000 of new debt that never existed before, while the bank will have a lien on their house or farm. If they do not repay the loan, we get the real estate for free. When someone buys a house, they are dependent on obtaining a bank loan to purchase it. The average house sells every 7.5 years. So in less than 10 years, the banks will have these counterfeit liens on most homes. Every loan from a bank will ensure that the people will have more debt, not only in principal balance, but also by paying us interest. If they do not pay us the interest, we foreclose and take their property. In short, the bank creates the money and buys up the nation's assets, ending up owning nearly everything. Today, people can own a 100,000 house debt free because of Lincoln. Tomorrow, the same house will have a 90,000 mortgage on it, and the bank will receive 10% interest. Each year, we will receive 9,000 of the homeowner's income for free, simply because Congress and the President will make it legal. We will have to breach the loan agreement, but since no one understands banking, no one will sue. Credit cards, student loans, car loans, house loans, commercial loans, and government loans will be financed by the money we create and loan out at interest. The new law will create a new personal income tax, IRS, so that the government will have the money to pay interest on the national debt that the banks will receive for free. The bank will pay 2.5 cents for 100 of cash. The bank will then loan the cash to the government to finance the government deficit. The government will give the bank back a 100 government bond and then tax the citizens 8. The government will give the 8 to the bank in the form of 8% interest. And that's interest, that's 8 cash. And on 100 government bond that the bank received for 2.5 cents, it will be like the government giving banks the cash as a gift and the banks returning the money back as a loan. Soon the government will create a 5 trillion deficit by overspending, forcing the people to pay nearly 40% of their IRS tax to the bankers. We will force the wives to work as much as their husbands so that the banks can receive more profit. If a family has an income of 50,000, they will pay 10,000 in income tax. 40% of the tax, that's 4,000, will be paid to the banker for interest on the government bonds they received for 2.5 cents. The family will have a 100,000 house with a 90,000 mortgage, paying the bank 10% interest. So there again, the bank will receive 9,000 for free. Two car loans, student loans, and credit cards would meet another 30,000 of debt at 10% interest, giving the bank another 3,000 for free. The banks will receive an average of 16,000 from this family alone. Today, the banks get nothing. But when we get this bill through, we could get 32% of an average family's income for free. Another man, Frank, spoke up, explaining how the state, county, and city governments need loans just like the federal government. The banks, he said, will create money and loan it to the state, county, and local governments so that the American people must pay taxes to cover the interest on the money. The banks create and loan out. Government is the biggest monopoly. All we have to do is get the money for free and loan it to the monopoly. Then we use the judges and police to collect the taxes, and we get nearly half of it back for free. To get the judges, police, and lawmakers to join us, we will show them how to profit from foreclosures. Sheer greed will enforce this banking system. The law will allow us to take from the Americans, putting their money and wealth into our hands without ever loaning 1 cent of other depositors' money. Many states have a 7% sales tax and a 3 to 5% income tax. The banks could get much of this tax once we get the monopoly into enough debt. Gasoline tax, utility tax, sales tax, real estate tax, and state income tax could be as high as 10% of a family's income. The banks could receive nearly 40% of the tax for free, which is 4% of families' income. Add the 4% to the 32% calculated earlier, and the banks could receive about 36% of an average family's income for free. Doubting Thomas continued to argue that the people would never allow this and that the media would expose it even if it got through Washington, D.C. In response, Richard explained, the major media is easy to control. They cannot exist without bank loans either. They know that if they upset the banks, they will not get the loans they need to stay in existence. With all the bank profit and retirement money to invest, we can own a portion of the major media and publishing companies as well. Anyone speaking against the banks will be labeled as a conspiracy nut and an anti-government group that will shut people up. That will shut people up. If we collect nearly 36% of the income from families, we have plenty of money to be one of the largest political funders of presidents, Congress or representatives, judges, sheriffs, and other officials. They need the media and money to get elected. Let everyone argue over the little issues, but never allow this secret to be revealed. Anyone running for political office to correct our banking system will never receive favorable major media attention and will never get elected. Any lawmaker opposing the banks will be taught a lesson by having the media favor their opponent in the next election. The banking interest will simply withdraw financial support from those who oppose them and give financial support to political candidates who help us continue our banking system. Other lawmakers will learn by example, thus keeping them in line. We have to sell the idea to the American people without them understanding the truth. We will give the bank a name to make it sound governmental, making the people think it is federal, but it will be privately owned. The central bank will give back to the government any profit, but the government cannot audit the bank and the bank pays no IRS tax. We simply load up the bank expenses so there is little profit to give back to the government. Whether or not we give back profit is irrelevant. This just makes it look good to the public so they will not get wise and vote us out. The profit the local banks creating money and loaning it out. We will simply deceive the people. Today, people think they can only deposit cash, checks, drafts, and wire transfers into checking accounts. The new banking law will allow us to deposit the bank loan agreement or promissory note, contract borrower signed agreeing to repay the loan into a checking account. A 100,000 promissory note can be sold for 100,000 of cash or government bonds. So depositing a promissory note is just like depositing cash. The bank will receive a 100,000 promissory note from the borrower, deposit the promissory note, or sell the promissory note for 100,000 cash and deposit the cash. Then the bank withdraws the funds and returns it back to the same borrower, calling it a bank loan check. The bank never invests or loans 1 cent to obtain the promissory note. The promissory note acts like new money because it can be sold for money. The promissory note is deposited, creating a new checking account balance, bank liability owing money. It has the economic effect of 100,000 of counterfeit money or of stealing the 100,000 promissory note and returning the value of the stolen property back to the victim as a loan. So economically speaking, it is similar to stealing the victim's or borrower's future payroll checks, depositing the payroll checks and returning the money back to the victim as a loan, instead of a return of the capital earlier deposited. The bank loans nothing of value, but obtains the promissory notes, liens on the nation's homes, cars, farms, and businesses for free. For every 100,000 loan, the people have an additional 100,000 of debt that did not exist before. If people loan their neighbors money, and if banks loan other depositors money, 100,000 is not shifted from the people to the banks for free. The bank loan agreement is the problem. We cannot explain the truth in the agreement. The bank must conceal and omit the part about the borrower being the lender, creditor, or depositor. If people understand the truth, they will never agree to it. Mike spoke up and explained that if the bank was to be truthful in the bank loan agreement, it would say, the bank loans no legal tender or other depositors money to fund the bank loan check. The borrower agrees to loan the bank the 100,000 promissory note, and the bank loans the same 100,000 back to the borrower. The borrower must repay the loan back to the bank, but the bank never repays the loan from the borrower to the bank. John was so excited he jumped up, interrupting Mike. It is like the borrower asking for a 100,000 loan. The moment the borrower signs a 100,000 promissory note, they've created a paper that can be sold for 100,000 cash. Because the promissory note has interest, an investor will pay 100,000 for the 100,000 promissory note. The investor's money is safe because the collateral, which is the lien on the house or car, the investor's money is safe because of the collateral, which is the lien on the house or car. If the borrower does not pay the loan, we foreclose and get our money. The bank loans nothing. It simply deposits the 100,000 and withdraws it again, returning it back to the borrower as a bank loan check. The new 100,000 acts like new money. The bank gets the 100,000 check and the 100,000 promissory note for free. The bank gets the borrower's future labor for free, or the bank forecloses and gets his or her house for free. The bank does not give up 100,000. They receive 100,000 and return it as a loan to anyone stupid enough to give them 100,000 in the first place. Sam said, depositing the promissory note is like depositing cash because it can be sold for cash. Banks sell depositors cash for government bonds to get interest. So we will not only deposit cash, we will deposit the promissory note and then sell the promissory note for government bonds. It makes no difference whether cash or promissory notes are deposited. We sell both to get government bonds that can be sold later for cash if we need it. Depositing a 100,000 promissory note is like depositing new money, creating a new deposit. Then the check is written from this new deposit. The check has cash behind it, so it is not check knitting. We loan nothing for the promissory note. We get it for free and then loan it back to the one we stole it from. If we can keep stealing and returning the value of the stolen property back to the victim as a loan, the bankers will end up owning the world for free. We can control everything. Joe explained what he loved most about the idea. It is too confusing to explain this to a jury. If we foreclose, the victim has no money to take the bank to court and hire an attorney and expert witness. Peter was sitting quietly in the back of the room, thinking. He said, let me get this straight. On a national level, the government gives us 100 cash for the cost of printing it. And we loan it back to the government who gave it to us for free or printing costs. And when local banks grant a 100,000 loan, the borrower gives the bank 100,000 for free and the bank returns the 100,000 back to the borrower as a loan. James interrupted and asked, how can the bank receive 100,000 from the borrower for free when the borrower needs money and is going to the bank for a loan? Charles spoke up and said, the minute the borrower signs a 100,000 promissory note, the note can be sold for 100,000 cash. When you deposit the cash or promissory note into a checking account, there is a new checking account balance of 100,000 that acts like money. It is like creating 100,000 of counterfeit money. Whatever is deposited by law becomes the bank's property. People use checks to buy things instead of cash. So we do not need cash. We need checkbook money. James spoke up and said, it is simple. The government or the people give us money or something that can be sold for money and we get it for free. Then we return it back to the same person and call it a loan. The people will never figure it out because they think it is a loan. We will simply conceal the fact that we took the money we're lending from the borrower himself. If the borrower has no idea they gave us something and no idea what we did with it, we can do it all day long. Richard said, all we have to do is promise the politicians money to get elected. When they retire, we give them consulting fees and make them rich for passing the laws that take from the American pocket and put into our pocket for free. Money will control the media. Those who understand the system will become rich at the expense of the ignorant. Debbie finally piped up and said, you haven't even seen the best part yet. I used my economics background to write a bank manual showing banks how to expand and contract the money supply, forcing Americans into foreclosure and bankruptcy. Banks can create planned recessions and depressions to own the wealth of the nation for free. Our plan is to foreclose on all farms, ranches, homes, cars, and businesses. What Americans own today will be ours tomorrow, simply because a private organization will control the money. Richard concluded the meeting by making everyone take a vow of silence on the subject. One cannot prove that this secret meeting or one like it ever occurred, but one can look to see if the results predicted in such a meeting occurred. This book will prove that the economic effect of the plan discussed in this meeting has occurred in America. Once you learn the banking secret, you can help foreclosure victims and legally divert money from the banker's pocket back to the citizens where it belongs. American banking system on trial. I have been a certified public accountant for many years and have testified in court as an expert witness in financial matters for nearly a decade. I have also taught thousands of CPAs nationally for CPE, continuing professional education programs. A couple of years ago, one of my students, a bank auditor, proposed to me that all bank loans are fraudulent and proceeded to explain why. I am not defending the notion that they either are or are not fraudulent. Neither do I propose that the bankers and auditors are white-collar criminals. My aim is to see to it that you understand the whole bank loan agreement so that you may judge for yourself. I will present the evidence as given by the Federal Reserve Bank publications and the bank advertising and loan agreement. To understand this book, you may need to refer to the glossary for definitions of unique terms. Throughout the book, I will be citing the publications of official operations of the Federal Reserve Bank up to the end of 1996. In the past 4 years, I have used a manual and cassette tapes to teach people how the banks operate. I have found that many of the words and concepts are new to most people. Some people understand the material very quickly, but the majority of people who contacted me thanked me for repeating the basic ideas and giving a number of illustrations. If you are a quick study, please be patient with those who read a few chapters and then put the book down for a while before reading on. New words and concepts are difficult to absorb, so repetition is needed for most readers to understand them. This book was not written for bankers and certified public accountants. It was written for the person having trouble reconciling their checkbook to the bank statement and the person with no business background. To win back America, we need everyone to learn the material thoroughly. Even if you pick up on the concept quickly, the additional illustrations will help you to teach others. At all times, this book will presume that there should be equal protection under the law, money, credit, and agreement, and that the agreement should have full disclosure. At all times, this book will illustrate the economic effect of the bank transaction. The bank bookkeeping entries will tell the truth. We will not argue whether Federal Reserve notes cash are lawful or not. We will presume Federal Reserve notes are legal tender recorded as bank assets and checkbook money and bank assets as bank assets and checkbook money is a bank liability owing legal tender as proven by the bank publications. The aim of this book is to use the bank's publications, agreements, and court cases to prove our point. I believe you should be the judge and jury and weigh the evidence for yourself. The biggest fear the banks have, the biggest fear the banks and the government leaders have is that voters will discover the truth about the banking system and vote out every lawmaker, judge, and police official supporting it, voting in leaders who will bring justice to this land. I believe it is only human nature for one group of people to take advantage of others, but only if they can get away with it. It is the voters' responsibility to vote in honest statesmen who will not allow deception to continue and who will stop corruption and give us equal protection. It appears that the major media's job is to stop the truth and to elect politicians who will follow the banks. It is your responsibility as an American to get the truth out to all Americans. We need statesmen who will represent the majority of the people and not allow banks to obtain America's wealth for free, leaving the victim in perpetual debt. If you decide a bank is guilty, I will present you with a solution to cancel bank loans without going to court. The court is in session. You are the judge and the American voters is the jury. The plaintiffs against the banks are the founding fathers of this nation, who gave us a constitution requiring money of gold and silver, equal protection under the law, and the right to contract. The plaintiff is now reading the charges against the bankers. They are as follows. The banks are charged with violating the bank loan agreement. The banker is charged with advertising that they will loan a check as consideration, money, loan if the borrower signs the promissory note agreeing to repay the money. The lender is charged with foregoing the promissory note, recording it as a loan from the borrower, and using it to fund a loan from the bank back to the same alleged borrower. The bank fails to loan other depositors money or repay the unauthorized loan from the alleged borrower to the bank. The damages are equal to stealing, default, or counterfeiting. Additional felonies and breaches of agreement will follow as you read this book. The controversy lies in the agreement, not in the Federal Reserve notes. The bank wrote the bank loan agreement and recorded the bookkeeping entries. The borrower intended the promissory note only to be used as a guarantee to repay the money loaned. The banker's intent was to receive actual cash value from the alleged borrower for free and to return the funds as a loan from the bank to the alleged borrower. This fundamentally changes the cost and risk of the loan, allowing nearly all citizens' property to be given to the banks for free. The controversy is over who agreed to loan what to who agreed to fund the bank loan check, the borrower or the banker. This book will show that the bankers had intent and knew exactly what they were doing. The lawmakers, judges, and police had knowledge and allowed this practice to continue, even though they took an oath of office to uphold the U.S. Constitution, which gives everyone a Republican form of government, which prohibits the banks from stealing and counterfeiting, and which provides equal protection under the law. For the last year, I have offered a 1,000 reward to the first bank president or CPA bank auditor who signs the bank audit to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, answering each and every question I ask regarding bank loans, money, credit, checks, bank bookkeeping entries, bank policy, and other banking questions. The meeting would be public and recorded so people could obtain the information. The meeting must be at a time and location I agree to. The banker or CPA must agree to give all the specific details to the questions answered under penalty of perjury and not simply claim they do not know the answers. The bank must qualify as a member bank of the Federal Reserve Bank. If the banking industry has nothing to hide, then the bank presidents or CPAs are challenged to come forward and show the world the truth. The bankers have been challenged by the American people to sign the affidavit in the back of the book in order to prove their innocence. So far, the bankers have refused to either take the 1,000 reward or sign the affidavits. Their silence tells us everything we need to know. The Federal Reserve Bank publications admissions are prima facie evidence that the allegations in the lawsuit are true. Warning: in actual court cases, do not file this same lawsuits. This is for illustration and teaching purposes only. A real judge will throw out the case if you discuss things like gold and silver or the bank never loaning you anything of value. As you read the book, you will know how to argue with a real bank auditor, attorney, or judge using the arguments a real CPA expert witness would use. Two banking systems. Most people believe we follow the Abraham Lincoln or constitutional banking system. The constitutional banking system is a system whereby the government creates money. The government has three ways to receive money: taxing, borrowing, or printing money, including minting coins of gold or silver. When President Abraham Lincoln needed money to finance the Civil War, he decided not to rely on taxation or borrowing. He printed a greenback, cash, also known as United States notes, and used this to pay the soldiers and buy war supplies. When he printed the money, there were no debt and no interest because there was no loan. If the government has tax revenues of 500 million and spends 600 million, there is a 100 million deficit. Lincoln's solution was simply to print the 100 million needed to pay government expenses. This saved the taxpayers 100 million in taxes and also prevented them from having to borrow money and pay it back with interest. All money circulated into the economy would come from the government printing the cash and spending the money. With Lincoln's system, there is no government debt. Everyone benefits. Everyone saves in taxes and everyone has equal protection. The banks cannot create money. They can only loan out other depositors' cash. There is no stealing or counterfeiting. Nearly all the homes, cars, farms, and businesses in the country would be debt-free. Not so with the opposing banking system. The second banking system is called the European banking system. Under this system, the banks create the cash or money. The banks are privately owned and do not loan other depositors money. If the government runs a 100 million deficit, the bank prints the cash or the government prints the cash and gives it to the bank for the cost of printing paper and ink. The bank then loans the same 100 million cash back to the government as a bank loan. To ensure the government will pay the loan back, the government gives the banker 100 million of government bonds. Bonds are like promissory notes agreeing to repay the loan. The government must pay 10% interest to the bank for the 100 million cash loan. They collect 10 million in taxes, and the 10 million is paid to the bankers for interest on the loan. Within 12 months, the government owes the 100 million principal plus 10 million in interest. There is only 100 million in cash to pay 110 million owed. The government now has a new deficit of 150 million plus the 10 million in interest due. The government then prints 150 million in cash and gives the cash to the bank for the cost of printing, which the bank then lends back to the government at 10% interest. Within 12 months, the government owes the bankers 100 million for the first year plus 150 million for the second year. The interest is 10% of 250 million, calculated to be 25 million, plus the 10 million of interest from the previous year. The total money the government owes the bank is 285 million. Unfortunately, there is only 250 million printed to pay the bank towards the 285 million in principal and interest. World history shows the banks typically foreclose on the nation just like they foreclose on a house. Soon the bank files bankruptcy against the government and the bank owns the nation. All of the nation's assets are collateral for the national debt. There is never enough cash to pay the principal and interest. To stop an economic collapse, the banks must keep loaning more and more and more and more money to the government. With taxes increasing and increasing, soon the economy will fall into a depression and the banks will foreclose on the national debt. Nearly all homes, cars, farms, and businesses end up in the hands of the bank. When the European banking system grants loans, the bank loan agreement conceals one very important fact. The bank first receives the money they loan from the borrower for free. The bank then loans this money back to the borrower as a bank loan. Just as when the government gives the bank cash and the bank loans the cash back to the government. The same thing occurs when local banks grant house loans, car loans, student loans, business loans, and credit cards. This book will use the Federal Reserve Bank publications to prove that we are under the European banking system. Most Americans will argue that they do not give the bank 100,000 actual cash value for free and that the bank returns it back to them as a loan. This book will not only expose how this trick works, but will teach you how to argue the point like a certified public accountant expert witness, destroying the arguments of a judge, attorney, or banker. Would you agree to give the bank cash or something that could be sold for cash, allowing the banker to deposit the money and write a check back to you as a loan? Of course not. The banker believes this is what you agreed to. Most Americans know that if you deposit 100 cash into a checking account, there is a new deposit of 100 and the bank owes you 100. You can ask for the cash back as a return of your capital either deposited or write a 100 check. The 100 deposit funds the check. We know the bank cannot return the 100 back to us as a bank loan. Most Americans believe the bank will loan them 20,000 of other depositors' money if they sign a promissory note agreeing to repay the money. The banker does the opposite of what most Americans believe the agreement is, changing the cost and the risk of the alleged loan. The banker knows that if you deposit 100 cash, they can sell the cash for 100 of government bonds, with the banker receiving interest. Government bonds are just like cash. If the banker needs cash, they sell the government bonds. The trick is this simple. Instead of depositing cash, the banker sells the 20,000 promissory note agreement to repay the loan to investors for 20,000 cash. The banker then takes the cash and sells it for 20,000 of government bonds. Instead of depositing cash and selling the cash for government bonds, the banker sells the promissory note for government bonds and deposits the bonds. The banker deposits 20,000 to create a new 20,000 deposit, which acts like printing 20,000 of new money. You can write a 20,000 check from the new deposit. Then, the banker writes a check from the 20,000 deposited earlier and gives the check back to the borrower as a bank loan check. The banker received 20,000 for free from the alleged borrower, used it to create a new 20,000 bank deposit that acts like new money, and returned the same money back to the person as a bank loan. The alleged borrower signed the promissory note agreeing to repay the loan. hoping to receive other depositors' money, giving everyone equal protection. The bank never intended to loan anything of value for the promissory note. The bank intended to receive something from the borrower worth 20,000 for free and then return the money back to the borrower as a loan. Receiving something for free without permission is stealing. Selling the stolen property for government bonds or cash and depositing the government bonds or cash to create a new bank deposit, checkbook money, is equivalent to creating new money. The stolen property is used to create new money. Now you have an economic effect similar to stealing or counterfeiting rolled into one transaction. This book will now give the details of the evidence. The conclusion is that the bank receives the liens on the nation's assets for free. The written loan agreement never authorized such a transaction. Most Americans will argue that we are not under the European banking system because when a borrower goes to the bank for a 100,000 loan, the borrower does not have 100,000 to give the bank. If you think that we follow Lincoln's example today and loan other depositors money, that we are not under the European banking system, you were tricked right along with most Americans. If you earned 1,000 in the past 10 days and deposited the money into a checking account, would you allow the bank to keep it for free and then return the 1,000 back to you as a bank loan? Of course not. Unless you are completely insane. Would you agree to allow the bank to take the money you will earn 10 days in the future, deposit the money and return it back to you as a loan? If you are that gullible, I want to loan you some money. Your future labor represents the future payroll money to fund the loan repayment required by the promissory note. If you object to letting the bank have your 1,000 payroll check for free and giving it back to you as a loan, you would object to the European banking system. If you want justice and equal protection, you will follow Lincoln's and our founding fathers' constitutional gold and silver backed banking system. Banks hate gold and silver because they cannot manipulate the promissory note, deposit it, and create new money, a new bank deposit. If you believe that no class of citizens has the right to steal and counterfeit legally, then you agree with Lincoln and our founding fathers' Constitution. If someone kept stealing your future payroll checks, depositing them and returning the money back to you as a loan, you would be poor and in perpetual debt, paying interest to the thief. It is very profitable to steal and counterfeit, especially if you have the aid of government to enforce it. National Geographic, January 93, page 84, claims that the banks create money and loan it out at interest. Later, this book will show you Federal Reserve Bank publications confirming that this is true. There is a controversy as to who owns the Federal Reserve Banks. It is true that local banks own part of the Federal Reserve Bank in their district, but these local banks do not appear to have control over the Federal Reserve Bank. This kind of ownership means little, if anything, to most. Americans, Encyclopedia Britannica claims it is privately owned. The Fed does not pay IRS tax, but does pay real estate tax. Some researchers believe it is owned by the government. The economic effect remains the same whether it is government or private. I do not wish to explain the details regarding the corporate status of the United States government and or who owns the Federal Reserve Bank. It is sufficient to say that the Federal Reserve Bank is a federally chartered agency of the federal government. Are you mad yet? Remember how Ross Perot and Bob Dole went on national television wanting a balanced budget? Both were given information about banking and how the Federal Reserve Bank operates. Do you think they are smart enough to know about Abraham Lincoln and the Constitution? Did they tell you 32 out of the required 34 states passed a constitutional convention under the guise of needing a balanced budget, and that the bankers funded a new constitution to replace our existing one? It was to be a constitution wherein everyone loses the freedom of speech and religion, along with all other rights. The bankers' goal is to end our constitutional gold and silver money and equal protection. Notice how the media is silent about the truth? They are trying to talk you into a balanced budget while all we have to do is follow Lincoln's example. Bob Dole made a small fortune with his television advertisement pushing a cashless society. allowing the banks to have absolute control over every citizen through the use of credit cards. The banks create the problem deficit. Then they push for a constitutional convention to solve the very problem they created. The solution they the solution then is designed to end our rights. We would never agree to ending our rights unless we had a problem that needed to be solved. If the American people understood the truth, no one would believe Bob Dole or the media, and we could correct the problem. If you study and research, you will find the banks and the United Nations are working together with the same agenda. But that's left for another book. I thank the grassroots organizations of United We Stand for helping to stop the Constitutional Convention and helping people become aware of the banking problem. They know about the Federal Reserve Bank and the problems it has created. I believe if we can get this book out to the people of United We Stand, and if they support equal protection, we could restore America to her former greatness. I thank the grassroots for their gallant efforts to expose the truth. Grassroots Republicans and Democrats are just beginning to see the benefit of following the constitutional banking system. The Republican and Democrat leaderships may be receiving favorable media coverage and money from bankers, forcing them to remain silent. But the faster the grassroots movement grows, the faster the change will take place. The solution is simple. We need 200 people in every state to distribute 1,000 brochures. And soon 10% of the people will want out of their loans. The 10% will grow. Educated Americans will support us. As the numbers grow, statesmen will run for office to represent the people and not the banks. We must wake the voters up. We must expose the big lies so we can vote out every lawmaker, judge, and police official who would aid and abet the enemies of our founding fathers in the Revolutionary War. Two great Americans said it all. In Bulletin November 1991, page 4, President Andrew Jackson is quoted as saying, quote, "If the American people only understand the rank injustice of our money and banking system, there would be a revolution before morning." End quote. Automaker Henry Ford Sr. said, quote, "It is well enough that people of the nation do not understand our banking and monetary system. For if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning." End quote. See bibliography number 10, page 11. We do not need guns or bombs. America has the greatest government in the world. All we need is an informed populace willing to vote out anyone who thinks one class of citizens should have the legal right to enforce an economic effect of stealing and counterfeiting against other citizens. All right, we're gonna stop there for today. We're gonna take up the next from chapter 5 in the next reading. Thanks for your time and patience, guys. Overwhelming information, mind-blowing information. We keep going.